Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video, we have another off-season preview video. In today's video, we're doing part 3. We've talked about the Canucks and the Rangers, we've talked about the Hawks and the Maple Leafs. Today we're looking at the next two teams who were eliminated, the Panthers and the New Jersey Devils. We'll touch on both of these teams, how they did this past year, how they're shaping up going to the off-season, and what they could do in the off-season to get better for the following season. We'll touch on all this coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey channel. And once again, if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below, don't forget to leave a comment, don't forget to hit the like button, tell all your friends the best hockey content on YouTube is right here at the End-to-End Hockey channel. So if you guys want to, definitely subscribe, it definitely helps out the channel. We're trying to hit 1,000 subscribers in the very near future, as well as trying to hit 650 in the next couple of days. So if you can, leave a subscribe, it really does help with the channel. Also, don't forget to stay tuned for more live streams coming out over the next couple of weeks, as we will be having some playoff live streams. Going to have a schedule coming out after the playoffs are announced, so definitely don't forget to check that out. But we will be having some playoff live streams, so definitely don't forget to check that out. But in today's video, we have another off-season preview video. This is the third installment of the off-season preview video. Going to have a couple more coming out over the next couple of weeks. Today we're looking at the Florida Panthers and New Jersey Devils as per usual. We'll look at some of their stats, their special teams, their goal scoring, their goals against, their point of goal scoring leaders. We'll look at 3 reasons this team's missed the playoffs this past season. We'll look at some of their pending UFAs, RFAs, their draft capital going into the offseason, and I'll give you 3 things I think these two teams should do in the offseason to get better and improve for next year. So we'll start with the Florida Panthers. As of recording this video, as of April 8th, the Florida Panthers are 37, 37, and 4 for 78 points with 4 games left. So not very many games left for the Panthers, and it's definitely been a down season for them after winning the Atlantic Division 2 years ago and being 3rd in the Atlantic Division last year. So definitely a down season there for the Panthers. They had 228 goals for, which was 20th in the NHL, 264 goals against, which was 28th in the NHL. So they're in the bottom half of the league when it comes to goal scoring, and then the bottom 5 when it comes to the goals against. So terrible team defensively, not great this year offensively either. Power play wise, once again, it's in the bottom half. It's not terrible, but it could be a ton better, as they're currently running at a 19.5% power play rate, which is 22nd in the entire NHL. So not great news there. And they have an 81.1% PK, which is actually 10th best in the NHL. So the goal scoring and the power play, they're not terrible, but they're still in the bottom half of the league. The goals against, it's in the bottom 5. It's not been overly good. But the PK, once again, another team who was eliminated quite early in the season, does wind up getting a pretty dang good PK throughout the entirety of the regular season. So once again, PK's been their one bright spot, but the other 3 stats, goal scoring, goals against, and power play, just it was not good for the Florida Panthers. Goal scoring wise, Reinhart led the team with 61 points, followed by Bennett with 58 and Verhaeghe with 55. And Reinhart led the team with 29 goals, followed by Markstrom with 27 and Bennett with 26. Once again, we've seen worse in some of these other offseason preview videos, so it's not terrible. They have a couple of 50-point players, they have a couple of 20-plus goal scorers, but it could be a lot better. Like Reinhart over the past couple of years has at least hit like 40, if not close to 50 over the past couple of seasons. He's only got like 29 right now. So definitely, they're not as good offensively as they have been in years past, but it's not terrible. Need to do some work, need to try and tinker around some things, but they definitely have a foundation still, so very interesting note there. The 3 reasons I think this Panthers team missed the playoffs this year: 1, the wear and tear from the playoffs, plus all the injuries. They have a plethora of injuries this year, plus they've gone to 3 straight Stanley Cup finals. They lost in 23, and then 1 in 24 and 25. I expected them to be a first-round exit because I expected the wear and tear on their bodies to sort of catch up to them this year. I just didn't expect it to catch up to them enough that they wouldn't even make the playoffs. They've had a plethora of injuries. Barkov was injured in the preseason, has not played a singular game this year. Could check him with a couple of months. Marchand's been out of the lineup. Jones was out for like a month and a half. Ekblad was out for a while. Kulikov's been out for a while. So this Panthers team has dealt with a fair share of injuries. I think just sort of like with the Maple Leafs, not only with the wear and tear of going to 3 straight Stanley Cup finals, but all of the injuries that they suffered. The Florida Panthers were a very injury-riddled team. I think that was the main reason this team missed the playoffs. The second one was not great goaltending. Sergei Bobrovsky, who has been brilliant the last couple of seasons, which has helped the Panthers lead to back-to-back cups, has not had great numbers. I think he has like a sub 880 save percentage and a goals against average above 3.00, which is not overly good for Bobrovsky's standards. And Tarasov, while he does have a little bit better numbers, has a worse record than Sergei Bobrovsky does. So all in all, it's not been great goaltending from Tarasov and Bobrovsky. Both are pending UFAs. They may walk away from them. They may try and bring them back. But still, I think one of the major reasons that this team missed the playoffs was that their goaltending was not up to par this year. And the third thing, I think, was not enough depth scoring. Now, once again, the injuries that they suffered to guys like Rodrigues and Tkachuk and Markstrom and Barkov does hurt their depth scoring. But still, on top of that, their depth scoring was not where it needs to be. They had a couple of decent players who had some really good seasons, but like Louis Ryan, I don't think was up to par. Lindell was not up to par. Samoskevich was healthy scratched a couple of times. They've had a couple of other decent bombs, like forwards haven't produced overly well. Kunin, Gregor, things like that. So I don't think they had enough depth scoring this year to really make that push for the playoffs. So all in all, in my opinion, the wear and tear plus injuries on their bodies, on top of that, bad goaltending from Bobrovsky and Tarasov, and not enough depth scoring were the three main reasons, in my opinion, this Panthers team missed the playoffs. Now, if you look at their current projected cap for the upcoming season, it is around $88.46 million, which will leave them with a projected $15.54 million in cap space for this upcoming season. So not a terrible amount of cap space to work with. They do have a decent amount of pending RFAs and UFAs that we'll touch on here. So if you look at their significant pending UFAs, they have Cole Schwind, Luke Cunnin, A.J. Guerrier, Noah Gregor, Thomas Nosek, Vinny Nostroza, Jack Staniszka, Sergei Bobrovsky, and Daniil Tarasov, who are all pending UFAs. It sounds like they really do want to bring back Bobrovsky and Guerrier for the right price, so I could see both those guys get brought back. Schwind's on the younger side of things. I could see him be brought back. Nosek's a pretty decent fourth line center. I could see him be brought back. And Tarasov's also on the younger side of things and was a decent backup this year for Florida, so I wouldn't be surprised if he was brought back either. But like Staniszka, Nostroza, Gregor, and Kunin, I think are definitely going to be gone. So I could see the Panthers bring back a couple of pending UFAs, but I wouldn't say they bring back a ton of them. If you look at their RFAs, they got Samoskevich, Bjornfoot, Sabrango, Benning, and Hovorka. I think they probably bring back Hovorka and Benning on short-term low-end deals. Sabrango's actually been a pretty decent third-pair defenseman, so I wouldn't be surprised if they extended him. There's been some talk of the Panthers potentially moving Samoskevich, so I think they'll probably give him like a 3 or 4 year deal at around like the $3 million mark if they were to keep him. If they do end up moving on from him, I do think that's a possibility, but I don't think he's just not going to get qualified. When it comes to Bjornfoot, I do think there's a very likely possibility the Panthers just not qualify him. He's been a decent guy since being claimed off waivers a couple of years back, but not to the extent that the Panthers were hoping for. So very interesting note there, but those are my thoughts on the pending RFAs and UFAs for the Florida Panthers. Next, going over to the team's draft capital. Sort of like with the Toronto Maple Leafs, this team was a team who was expecting to go for a playoff push this year, so they don't have a ton of draft picks. They have no first round picks, unless of course their pick is in the top 10, then they might get back from Chicago. They have their own in the Capitals second round pick, no third. They have the Hawks 4th, their own 5th and 6th, and the Minnesota Wild's 7th. So they do have 6 draft picks, 2 in the first 2 rounds, which isn't terrible. It could be up to 3 in the first 2 rounds if they do get their first round pick back. So like I said, it's not terrible. For a team who missed the playoffs, it's definitely not good. But we've seen worse, especially with Toronto, who didn't even have a pick in the first, I think, 3 rounds. So having a couple of second round picks isn't terrible for the Florida Panthers, especially given the fact both those picks are looking like they're going to be in the top half of the draft in this upcoming year's draft. So once again, not great news there. They only have 6 draft picks, but it could definitely be worse. So very interesting note there. And lastly, going over to 3 things I think this Panthers team should do in the offseason to improve and get better for the future. The first one has to be figure out who starts in net. Sergei Bobrovsky, pending UFA. Daniil Tarasov, pending UFA. So both of their tandem goaltenders are pending UFAs. There's been a lot of talk that the Panthers want to try and re-sign Bobrovsky, which is a very likely possibility. But if they don't get to sign Bobrovsky, do they try and go down the trade market and try and acquire a goaltender? Do they go after a guy like Jordan Binnington if he's available? UC Saros. Do they try and go after maybe someone else like a Jake Allen from New Jersey? There's a couple of options I think could be trade chips out in the trade market who I think could wind up being very intriguing for the Florida Panthers. Maybe Thatcher Demko from Vancouver. So we'll have to wait and see on that. I think there's still a very likely possibility that Bobrovsky comes back. Maybe they'll go of Tarasov and bring in someone else who can sort of be the backup for the Florida Panthers. But I wouldn't be overly shocked too, if they don't feel like Bobrovsky wants to sign for a reasonable amount of time, that they wind up letting him walk and they try and bring in a solid starter. But I think either way, top priority has to be figure out who's going to be in net for the upcoming season. The second thing I think this team has to do is to free up some cap space, move some guys out, particularly Luostarinen and Evan Rodrigues. So the Panthers, like we talked about, they have about $15 million in cap space. They're going to have to sign some more players, including either re-signing Bobrovsky or getting another starting level goaltender. So they're going to need to free up some cap space either way to try and make some of these moves in the offseason. The most likely ones that come to mind would be Luostarinen and Evan Rodrigues. Both are making $3 million. I think Luostarinen has a couple more seasons left on his deal. I think Rodrigues is either entering the final year of his deal or has next year and the year after left on his contract. So I'm not sure exactly, but both make $3 million. Both would be easy cap cuts. Once again, it's not an easy ideal situation because both have been pretty decent middle six forwards for the Florida Panthers. But I think those would probably be the easiest way to clear some cap without having to take a substantial piece off their roster. And I definitely do think with the pieces they need to try and maneuver, they have to subtract someone off their roster. So I think freeing up some cap space is priority number 2, potentially moving off of Rodrigues or Luostarinen. And third thing I think this team should do is to add some more bottom six help, potentially some cheaper guys, especially if they move off of Luostarinen, move off of Rodrigues. They don't bring back a big chunk of their pending UFAs like Gregor, like Cunnin, like Nosek, like Schwind. They're going to need some more bodies to insulate their bottom six. So I'm not exactly sure who they could try and target. There's probably like a handful of guys who are going to hit the free agent market who I think the Panthers will have some interest in. There's probably a few guys who wouldn't cost overly much on the trade market that the Panthers may have some interest in. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But I think especially if they moved off of Luostarinen, Rodrigues, and let most of their pending UFAs walk, I do think there's a relatively chance the Panthers will be trying to add some more bottom six help. So very interesting out there. But the 3 things I think this Panthers team should do in the offseason to get better is to figure out their goaltending situation going forward. Are they bringing back Bobrovsky or are they going a different direction? Free up some cap space, potentially moving Luostarinen and Rodrigues, and adding a couple more bottom six forwards. So those are the 3 things I think the Panthers should do in the offseason to get better for next year. And lastly, here going over to the New Jersey Devils. Now when it comes to the Devils, when I was looking at the stats for them, they currently had a 40, 36, and 3 record for 83 points with 3 games left. So once again, they actually have a winning record, but it's not been enough to be able to get them into the postseason, at least in the Eastern Conference. In the Western Conference, they'd be competing. They had 217 goals for, which is 27th in the entire NHL. 243 goals against, which is tied for 19th in the NHL. They're running a 22% power play unit, which is 13th in the NHL. And they're running a 79.3% PK, which is 16th in the NHL. So if you look at these stats, they're slightly above average on their power play. So their power play has actually been quite good for the Florida Panthers. The penalty kill running around average at 16th right now, so could be better, absolutely, but it could be a lot worse too. So definitely some room to improve, but not terrible on the penalty kill. Their goals against was not terrible either. It was also in the bottom half of the league, but once again tied for 19th, very close to being an average team defensively. So once again, I think injuries contributed to that, but I definitely do think that while it could be a ton better, it's not the worst thing in the world how their defense played this year. Their offense, though, especially 5-on-5, was not great. They have the 27th ranked goal scoring. They're in the top half in the power play, so the power play is working, but the goal scoring 5-on-5 is not. Very interesting out there, but the Devils have had some mediocre stats. Definitely not ones that are going to get you into the playoffs, but decent ones that they could definitely improve in the future. But their goal scoring has been atrocious. Nearly a bottom 5 team in the goal scoring department, so that's something that the Devils really need to work on. Next, going over to the Devils' point and goal scoring leaders. So if we look at their point leaders, Jack Hughes leads the team with 73 points, followed by Bratt, who has 68, and Hischier, who has 62. So pretty good news there, as their 3 leading goal scorers all have 60 plus points, which is not half bad. Meanwhile, Nico Hischier and Jack Hughes both have 26 goals, and Meyer has 24 goals. So once again, you can see why they are one of the worst teams point scoring wise. Once again, Jack Hughes still looking pretty good. So is Bratt, so is Hischier. Those guys you expect to be good, but the supporting cast has not been overly good for the New Jersey Devils. Like, they have a couple of other 50 plus point players. I think they have maybe 1 or 2 more 20 goal scorers. So once again, could it be better? Absolutely, but it could also be worse too. We've seen a lot worse in these offseason previews. So once again, you can see why they're one of the worst teams goal scoring wise, but their big guys have come to play this year. So very interesting note there. The 3 reasons I think this team missed the playoffs this year was 1, they had a plethora of injuries, sort of like with Florida and Toronto. They had injuries riddle their team really badly. Kovacevic missed a whole bunch of time due to injuries. Brett Pesce's missed a whole bunch of time due to injuries. Luke Hughes been shut down for the season now due to injuries. Jack Hughes missed, I think it was like a month and a half with an injury, and there's been a couple of other depth guys such as like a Dodonov and a McEwen who've also missed time due to injuries too. So once again, the injury bug has not been pleasant to the Devils, including taking out both Hughes brothers at various points in the season. So they've had some bad injury blows to some of their stars, especially on the blue line, which has definitely derailed this team's season. So once again, teams can overcome bad injury blows, but it just seemed like the Devils could never do that this year, and I think the injuries are the key piece as to why this Devils team missed the playoffs. The second reason I think the Devils missed the playoffs was not enough depth scoring. Another team who did not have overly great depth scoring. As we saw, their big guys came to play. Bratt was doing good this year. Hischier was doing good this year. Meyer was doing acceptable. Jack Hughes was brilliant again. But their supporting cast, their third line, their fourth line, not overly good. Cody Glass is a guy who's actually been quite decent. But besides him and maybe rookie Gertsuk, they really haven't had much production from their bottom 6. So yeah, the lack of depth scoring, you can definitely see it in their goal scoring department. It's just, it has not been there for the New Jersey Devils this year. So not great news there. And the third reason I think this team missed the playoffs was Markstrom had terrible numbers. Jacob Markstrom, I think, has below 900 save percentage for the first time in his NHL career, and has the worst goals against average he's had since he became the starter for the Vancouver Canucks over a decade ago. So Markstrom is having himself a terrible season compared to his usual standards, and the Devils just gave him a 2-year contract extension earlier this year, so they're basically stuck with him for at least the next year. So very interesting note there, but I think the Markstrom regression, I think not enough depth scoring, and the injuries to key pieces like Jack Hughes and Luke Hughes were the 3 main reasons this Devils team wound up missing the playoffs. Now going over to their pending UFAs, their RFAs, their draft capital, and their cap. When it comes to their cap, they have projected 91.83 cap for their team for this upcoming 26-27 season, which only leads them a projected $12.17 million in cap space, which isn't overly good. If you look at their UFAs, their RFAs, not a lot of names here. They're going to have to sign a couple of these guys, but I expect most of these guys to probably wind up leaving. You've got on the UFA side, Dodonov, McEwen, McLaughlin, Chalowski, and White. I think maybe one of Chalowski or White and maybe McLaughlin signed like short-term low-end deals. Remaining depth pieces in the Devils organization, but I think there's a very likely chance that one of at least Chalowski or White, Dodonov, McEwen, they all leave as free agents. So I think those guys are most likely gone for the New Jersey Devils. When it comes to their RFAs, you got Kalen Addison, Tyler Brennan, Nico Dawes, Simo Nemec, Arsene Gertsuk, and Paul Cotter. So very interesting note there. Dawes, Brennan have both had some pretty decent numbers. Dawes at the AHL level, Brennan at the ECHL level. I think both will probably get low-end deals. I think there might be a small possibility that if the Devils don't see a future with Dawes, they could try and flip him before the offseason. Addison, they could see definitely not get qualified, has 27 points in 60 AHL games, decent numbers, but I think he probably winds up not getting qualified. And then you've got Cotter, Gertsuk, and Nemec. I think Cotter probably gets qualified by the New Jersey Devils, but I wouldn't put it past the Devils to potentially not qualify him. Well, you've got Gertsuk and Nemec, who both had pretty good seasons. Gertsuk having 13 goals and 31 points in 66 games, and Nemec having 11 goals and 26 points in 65 games. I think if the Devils did move off of Simon Nemec to trade him, they're not going to just not qualify him. So sort of like with Cotter, I could see him not be with the Devils to start next season, but I think more than likely have to be via the trade route. And I do think that they'll try and work out some sort of an extension, potentially a bridge deal with Arsene Gertsuk to keep him in the fold. So very interesting note there. But those are RFAs and their UFAs. The current draft capital for the New Jersey Devils for this upcoming season is only 5 draft picks. So similarly to Florida, to Toronto, the Devils were a team who was expecting to make the playoffs and never did. So they don't have a ton of draft capital here. They have their own first and second round pick. They have no third. They have the Jets fourth, their own fifth and sixth round pick, and no seventh. So they have no third or seventh round picks in this upcoming year's draft. So that's not overly good. They do have a couple of decent draft picks, including still having their first round pick, which is something that Florida and Toronto aren't guaranteed to have. So at least they have a first round pick, 2 picks in the first 2 rounds. It's not terrible. But once again, for a team who was eliminated earlier in the season, only having 5 draft picks is not overly good. So very interesting note there. But the Devils do only have 5 draft picks for this upcoming 2026 draft. So very interesting note there. And lastly here, going over to 3 ways I think the Devils can improve in the offseason to get better for next year. The first one has to be add a goal scoring top 6 forward. The team has been missing another top 6 goal scorer element. They were hoping that would be Timo Meier, but he has not been able to crack 30 goals with the New Jersey Devils. So I think putting together some sort of a big package to try and acquire a really solid top 6 forward, whether that's a guy like Jordan Kyrou, whether that's a guy like Alex Tuck in free agency, whether that's a couple of other players that I'm forgetting at this point in time. I think adding a top 6 forward, especially someone who can play with Jack Hughes, has to be top priority for the Devils. It was a priority for them last year. They never did it. So I think adding a top 6 forward has to be a priority for the Devils. The second thing has to be moving off some cap, especially if it was via the defensive market, whether it's a Kovacevic, a Hamilton, or a Nemec. I do think the Devils should move at least one of those 3. Hamilton's a pretty decent veteran top 4 defenseman who's making $9 million. Kovacevic, who missed a big chunk of last year's season, is a serviceable third, second pair defenseman. And Simon Nemec has had some really good flashes this year and looks like a future stud top 4 defenseman. So for the New Jersey Devils, I do expect them to move at least one of these guys. I think Hamilton will probably be the most likely scenario. There has been some talk about Nemec, but he's really good. He's on the younger side of things. I think he'll be a solution going forward. So I don't know exactly who they want it moving, but they need to clear some cap space. They have a logjam on the blue line, so I think it makes a ton of sense for them to try and move a blue liner. And I think that whether it's Nemec or Hamilton, it will happen at some point. So very interesting out there. And lastly, I think they have to figure out what the situation is with Nico Hischier. Hischier on July 1st will be eligible for an extension in New Jersey. He'll be a pending UFA. Does Hischier want to stay in New Jersey, or does he want to get traded? That's another interesting possibility because they've been running with the Hischier-Hughes tandem for the past couple of seasons. So if Hischier winds up walking away and leaving, where does that leave the Devils? So I think they have to figure out whether to trade or re-sign Nico Hischier, and they should probably do that very, very close after he is eligible to sign an extension on July 1st. So very interesting note there. But those are the 3 things I think the Devils should do in the offseason to get better and improve for next year. Add a goal scoring top 6 forward, move a defender, whether it's Kovacevic, Hamilton, or Nemec, and maybe try and figure out the situation with Nico Hischier. So that's what I think for the New Jersey Devils, but I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comment section below about the Devils and the Panthers. Are you surprised that these 2 teams were 2 of the first teams eliminated? I do think that with the right moves, the Devils could be competing again in the Metro Division next year, although I don't think it's a guarantee. And then for the Florida Panthers, they get healthier, they get a couple extra bodies up front, they look a little bit more lethal, maybe even win the draft lottery. I definitely do think the Panthers are going to be back next year as potential Atlantic favorites. So I definitely do think these 2 teams, if they have the right moves in the offseason, could be playoff bound as early as next year. So definitely, after you guys thoughts on all this down in the comment section below. Do you think these 2 teams can make the playoffs next year? What do you think they need to do in the offseason? And are you surprised at how terrible these 2 teams were? I'd love to hear your guys thoughts on all of that down in the comment section below. That's all I want to talk for today. Once again, if you haven't already, leave a subscribe, leave a comment, leave a like, tell all your friends. The best hockey content on YouTube is right here at the End to End Hockey channel. So if you can, leave a subscribe. It really helps with the channel. We're trying to hit 1,000 subscribers in the very near future. And also don't forget to leave a comment. Love to hear your guys' opinion on all I discussed here today. Stay tuned for my live streams coming out in the next couple of weeks, as we'll be having some playoff live streams. We'll have a schedule out after the playoffs, so don't forget to check in on that. I also have made a Buy Me a Coffee page, so if you guys really do like this channel and want to support it, go over to the page. I'll leave a link to it in the description below, and it's just a way that you guys can help support me. I also do a blog talking about news, rumors, analysis, stuff like that, so check that out. I'll link to that down in the description below. I can't wait to see you guys all for the next video. God bless you all. I'll see you all in the next one.